Hello and welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe with me, Tom Sherrington and Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
Very good, and very good indeed. And we have the airwaves to ourselves today. It's just you and me, so I'm looking forward to our chat. We do this from time to time. How's things been with you?
Oh, very busy, very good. But I know you've had a very busy weekend at a very interesting gathering of the warm, the wise, and the wonderful of education. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think that's probably one of the biggest events of its kind, Research Ed, and it was huge. It was at Parliament Hill School in Camden for the second time in a row, which was a great venue. And it was just really extraordinary. It's the 10th anniversary since Research Ed started in 2013. And it's really a remarkable event. And I just want to maybe share a little bit about it. Have you been to many Research Ed events?
Just the one. Just the one a couple of years ago. Saturdays were always a struggle in my house with swimming and athletics and bits and bobs. So I did get there once, and I'm sure I'll get there again at some point. But at the moment, I'm in the throes of junior athletics. So no, is the short answer.
Well, it's actually one of their innovations over the last few years. Actually, they provide a creche on Saturday. So some people are really grateful for that. Like people with kids, it's so hard to give up your Saturday. And Tom Bennett always does this brilliant intro where he talks about how we're all mad to be there, because it does feel like, why are you all here on a Saturday? But I just think it was worth really like just taking stock of what that represents, because 10 years ago, I was at the first Research Ed at Dulwich College. I've got the programmes here. For those people watching this on YouTube, you'll see this is the 2013 Research Ed programme.
Well, I need to play the Antiques Roadshow music to go along with just Antiques Roadshow intro.
I've got a whole collection. I've got lots of these. So this was actually, and then 2023, here it is, the 2023 conference. I haven't got all of the programs, but I have been to now 42 different Research Ed events.
Wow.
I think there are other people who have been to more, but there's one person only, we think, who has been to every single one of the national events every the beginning of every year, and that is Professor Becky Allen. So she's been to all of them, never missed one, and I don't think anyone else has. Some people have just missed one or two, and I've missed a couple of them. But if you look at the program on the first one, 2013, there are 10 people who were then talking, who are at the one today, and I'm one of them. I'm proud to say. But I'll just give you a flavour of some of the other people. So one of the people speaking was Amanda Spielman, who then was off-qual in looking at qualifications, and this time she was leaving Ofsted. Obviously, Tom Bennett, John Tomset, our great friend, who was then the head of his school. I won't go through maybe all of them. Professor Rob Coe. Now, Rob Coe was then right at the beginning talking about evidence and research and bringing them together. And he was then at Durham University, and now he's working for evidence-based education and the great teaching toolkit. And he was talking about instructional coaching, more of which later. Laura McInerney, she's absolutely brilliant. We've interviewed her. She was, there manning the teacher tap stall with great gusto on Saturday, but she did this amazing session back in 2013 about sort of tricky problems, what the kind of difficult problems ought to be that maybe we should be researching. That was fantastic. And who else? David Weston. So David Weston is one of the kind of legends of CPD development, setting up the Teacher Development Trust. And to some extent, he's probably been saying the same thing ever since, because it's just a constant message, like the need to talk about CPD in schools. Of course, Sam Friedman was there. Both of them. He's the policy person, in the UK, an absolute genius talking about education policy, and of course Tom Bennett himself. And Becky Allen, as I said. So there's a few constant themes, and it's interesting that that the similar themes persist, don't they? It's not like everything's changed so much. We're still talking about CPD, behaviour, evidence-informed practice, and school leadership and all these things, because the problems are never easily solved. The difference if you look at the program, can't even be printed in this. There were 120 different sessions on Saturday,
Wow.
6, 20 in each one, and it was an absolute nightmare picking where to go. But it was amazing. It was really exciting to be part of it and to see how it's mushroomed into this sort of a kind of feature of our system. I think in the UK that research ed is a thing that you can rely on being there. It's there's so many events planned in the regions as well as the national event, and there's nothing else like it. There isn't an equivalent conference with that kind of quality and scale that is led by people directly involved. So I'm a massive fan. It was brilliant to see so many people there, and we're talking about what happens in our system. I just think it's fantastic. There's
what did you learn from it this year then? What are your takeaways?
Well, one of my main takeaways links to a guest we're going to be interviewing soon, Ben Newmark. So he did this fantastic session. In fact, somebody, I think it was Adam Boxer, put a message out saying, he can never go on a Saturday because of Shabbat. But he says, what's the one thing that you learned? And I thought, well, the thing that stuck in my mind was the session by Ben Newmark and Tom Rees, who both of whom have got children with identified special needs of different kinds, and both of them had the experience of putting their children through school and entering into the world of schooling anyway, and feel that it doesn't serve them as who they are. So they're really, really profound messages. I was quite struck by it. I'm looking forward to talking to Ben about it. This idea that you take a child with all their complexity and who they are, and if you design a system for them, you'd start with, okay, that's you, let me teach you what you need, and you build around them. But the way they are dealt with is, you're not like everybody else, and that's the starting point. And then the entire education is framed around the fact that you're not like everybody else, rather than you're who you are. And that kind of hit me between the eyes, really. That it's so obvious to say it, but and there was this quote which kind of like choked me up a bit that Ben gave, which was one of the case studies he cited, where a head teacher says something like, what would we do today to support this child if they were ours? Because they are. It's like, like if they were your own kid, what would you do? But they are our kids, and it's like, let's do better. So that to me was the main thing, and they've then supported it with this massive study they've been doing about provision. They've written some papers and the policy papers and stuff about and trying to sort of shape kind of thinking going ahead around special needs, including the attempt to take away the label special needs, because in itself SEND is a barrier to that understanding, because you have to label people in order for them to get the support and so on. Anyway, we can talk more about that with Ben, but it was good. It was really good, and that was just one of them.
And I saw all over social media at the weekend research ed session by Sam Curran, Power Teams. Yeah. Every time I logged on, Sam was all over my timeline with his new John Catt book, Power Teams. So if you haven't read that yet, have you read it?
I have.
Mr. Sherrington, you have? What did you think?
No, I think it's really good. And Sam to me is like, he epitomizes for me so many great things about our profession. Like he's he's so like into it and thoughtful.
So into it.
You know what I mean? It's like he thinks hard about it all, and it's a sincerity there, which I really love. But it's also a humour and a humanity, which is just great. So he's written this book. He's like thrilled to bits about it. But I saw his talk at Research Ed, and it was just great. He went through some of the factors that make up good teams. We'd have to get him on the podcast to give the full works. But he was so.
I want to ask him about his cake. He's the only person I've ever seen who had a book cake. That was what I was picture as well.
No, exactly, making the thing. But he was sort of saying that teams, we're in teams, and we can kind of moan about a team if it's not good, but we don't necessarily think hard about how to make teams more explicitly talk about how does this team function, and talking explicitly about the protocols of being in a team, and how a team can work to support itself or not. And there's lots of really good thinking in there. Yeah, I did a thing in it for about how teams can be used for coaching, which is my sort of passion thing. Like I find that I'm encountering that idea all the time. So I was quite pleased.
In fact, stay with that, Tom. Stay with coaching and talk to me about instructional coaching, because I know we've been kind of throwing it around a little bit off air, talking about coaching. So let's have the coaching conversation on here, and you talk to me about your thoughts around instructional coaching. What's on your mind with that at the minute?
Yeah, it's good because it's sort of this is Rob Coe. Rob Coe's great. So he's a bit of a kind of he likes to stir the pot and burst people's bubbles of complacency around things, which I think is probably a good thing. So what I mean by that is that, so for example, last year at Research Edge, Rob Coe's talk was about what do we know about leadership, and it turns out we don't know very much.
Is the answer nothing? Is the answer pretty much nothing?
But it's really hard to pin down an evidence base for, leaders should do this and then that, and because they do that, this works, because there are so many variables, basically. It's really hard to tie it down. So that was his sort of massive bubble bursting last year. Like, the evidence we know about research, about school leadership is pretty weak. And so we're kind of guessing too much and so on. So this year his torpedo was, is instructional coaching the new brain gym? So when you start off a talk by saying, is it the new brain gym? You're basically saying, is it just a whole pile of rubbish that people have fallen for, and it's turned out to be, hasn't have no validity whatsoever? So that's kind of what he was saying. Now, I'm going to, spoiler alert is this, his final slide said, not really. In other words, no, it's not the new brain gym, because there's actually much more evidence for instructional coaching being successful than that. But here's the real meat of what he was saying. Instructional coaching works in very specific conditions when it's tested and shows a positive effect. And when schools are thinking, I'm doing instructional coaching, they are not necessarily replicating the conditions in which it has been successful. And that is just a massive, spotlight on a big hole in people's assumptions. And you've got to go, okay, that is absolutely intelligent and a really important part of sort of research engagement. We can't just go, oh, nice, apparently this is effective, and then do something which is a kind of amateur version of it. And that's a message.
Tonight, Matthew, I'm going to do instructional coaching. I started it right.
Yeah. So
do you think it's essentially a form of lethal mutation then?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there'll be people who think they're doing instructional coaching, who people who've studied it and researched it, think they're holding their heads in head in the hands, going, "Oh my God, no, that's not it." So I think there is two things that I wanted to mainly say about this. One of them is, I think we need to be a little bit more patient with these things and be more understanding of the fact that, just because people don't get it right straight away, it doesn't mean it's a total failure or that it's a terrible idea. It's part of it's a natural process that, you're told by the researchers. And why should we be researchers? We're not. So you look at research which says instructional coaching has got a strong effect when it's done properly. Oh, great, let's have some of that then, because our CPD is not nearly good enough. Great, let's look at that. And intellectually, we understand why it ought to work. So yeah, let's do it. But you know what? It's sort of hard to get right straight away. So it costs time and investment to train people, and that's natural. And of course, if it ends up being a little bit sort of maybe overly rigid to start with, for example, because we need systems, we need to train people, and we need to follow scripts because otherwise people don't know how to do it. That's fine. That's great. 5 years later, those people will be fluent coaches. They don't start off like that. And sometimes people are so intolerant of that. They just think, oh, it's all a bit too rigid. Well, of course it's going to be, because they're learning to do it. It's like that's how it goes. So all the other way around is people are so worried about the rigidity, they kind of flap around at it being all nuanced, but actually they're just not getting anywhere near it, doing it well. And some people are doing it badly, and some people that happen to be able to do it better. And it's just, again, similarly problematic, that approach, but you've got to find a way around. So anyway, so that's my sense of it, that we shouldn't be knocking something which is in its kind of development phase because it's got so much potential. We should be talking about how to do it well rather than critiquing the whole very idea of it prematurely.
I see it on my travels everywhere, and the number of things I've been told that I'm looking at that are apparently instructional coaching are so wide and varied. I'm thinking, somebody here isn't doing it. Somebody in this array of things I'm seeing is not doing instructional coaching, and somebody is, because it can't all be instructional coaching because it's so wildly variable.
Well, the thing is, although maybe it could be, because for example, it's like saying, coaching you can have different styles of coaching. So I think it's important to remember that the word instructional just means it's about instruction. And Jim would say that. So we've got coaching about sport, and we've got coaching about instruction. And so we call it instructional coaching rather than sports coaching. So and that can take many styles. So instructional coaching can be very direct. Come on, Emma, I think you should be doing this because...
Oh, I get that a lot.
It might be just leading you along. So they say, yeah, what do you think? What are you aiming to go? What are your goals? What do you think might solve that problem? And you just lead the whole thing. So you can flex coaching hugely according to the person and within the same person over different phases of their development, all kinds of things. So I think if you're trying to box it in and say instructional coaching has to be a precise defined term, which means X, well, that's prejudging the nature of it in the moment. I don't think that's helpful. And also, you can do instructional coaching with 2 people at the same time, or 3, or a team. I've done it. It works. You can coach multiple people simultaneously, very efficiently and very effectively, because they've got this collaborative spirit. So I think that broad church approach. And so what I found, I mean, don't want to just bang on forever about this, but in the discourse, you get people who are sort of pitted against each other when I find that unhelpful. So in our work, in the walkthroughs, we're sort of friends with Step Lab because they're our partners. We're colleagues, and they have a platform which supports people to deliver instructional coaching, one-to-one coaching with all sorts of resources, tools, scripted sessions, prompts for having a good conversation. And it really supports the whole organization to do it because it kind of guides you through it, and it's very detailed and they can flex it now more. So we think they work well. But we've also really got a lot in common with Jim Knight, who would probably start from the opposite end and build around the individuals and goals. And so what do you need to solve? And he's much more orientated towards the individual and start as a starting point rather than, say, the organization. And I just think everyone's doing good stuff. Sort of the idea that we're sort of like, against each other, or sort of that there's purists and the kind of mavericks, or the rigid system people versus the kind of warm, fluffy kind of. I just think that's all really unhelpful.
The principles and the aims need to be the same. The practice may look different.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think there's some common features. So one of the common features would be a teacher needs to be getting some kind of feedback. A teacher needs to be, wherever possible, driving their own process. And also you need to have iterative cycles. It needs to go small steps, looping around and come back and refine over time. And provided those things are present, that can take many forms, which makes it a useful vehicle when you go into a real life school. Like today, I met today, like one formentary primary school. They have 8 teachers. The way they do coaching isn't going to be the same as the secondary school I spoke to afterwards, where they have 100 teachers and 10 people on the senior leadership team. I mean, and it's just so you have to construct a language for a system which can work all over lots of setups so that you can get it working, Yeah, anyway, so those are my thoughts about instructional coaching. It's like, it's great to debate it, but I feel like I worry about like kind of people who like to batter things and they're doing it too early.
I think I worry more about people who just want to do it to say that they're doing it and actually haven't thought about what they want to achieve as a result of doing it, but they think they've got to do it because they think everybody else is doing it, so we must do it as well. That's what I worry about.
Yeah, that could happen.
Yeah. But we need to do this because everybody else is doing it. Quick, let's do it.
Yeah. But it's a long-term thing. So it's one of those things that you can't, it's one of those things I spoke to a chat today about something where he was saying, I really want to do it, but I'm not sure if my SLT will buy into it. And I said, well, look, you can't do this on the side. It's the whole thing. You can't just sort of sneak in a bit of...
That's the rule of instructional coaching club is you don't talk about instructional coaching club.
You've got to win the discussions, haven't you? You've got to sort of say, come on, folks, this will do this and organise things and make it like a focus for your organisation. So you kind of have to do the work of persuading people and take the time it takes. And I think that's my feeling about it. But it's great. I mean, I love the fact that it's kind of being discussed and the number of sessions they're very evaluative. You go through the initial phase of it's the answer. And then sort of a couple of years later, it's, oh, actually, it's quite problematic and we need to do it. But the mature state is, this is how it works in an institutional level in multiple ways. And we kind of will reach the point where it's no longer controversial. It's just discussed in terms of the mechanics of it. And I think that we're kind of down that track.
It reminds me a little of when we first had to start phonics in primary and we were all doing it, and it was like you can't deviate from the script in some sentences, and some people are like, but I want to do it my way, I've kind of done it like this forevermore. And it's only kind of a few years down the line that everybody's kind of agreed on the general principles of it, but recognize that it's going to have to look different in different setups, whether you're that school with 8 teachers, whether you're a school with 3 teachers, which I've been working with recently, or a school with 20 teachers. It's going to have to look different in its enactment, but the principles are exactly the same. And when we talk about instructional coaching and the rollout and that long-term investment in it, it does remind me very much of the phonics rollout, the Key Stage 1 that's happened over the last few years. It's only now that everyone's kind of, I won't say everyone's agreed it's a good thing, but everybody's agreed that we're going to do it. And if we do it well, these will be the principles of it. So maybe it'll just take a few more years, like the phonics, to sort of embed and become part of the everyday language of every teacher. Well, not every teacher.
So. Although the evidence for phonics is like 10 times stronger than the evidence for instructional coaching.
I'm talking more about the implementation of it necessarily, rather than the outcome, the direct measurable effect of it. But trying to undo ingrained practice and ingrained approaches with people, or at the same time trying to develop emerging approaches with people who are just coming to something. It's really hard and it's really tricky, and you're not going to implement something really easily with everybody at every career stage and every kind of experience base. So potentially, instructional coaching is going to take time to embed. It is going to take time to start bearing fruit, and it is going to take time for people to kind of see the effects and not necessarily the first followers, but be those advocates for it going forward. But because of the way that it's integrated into the ECF and ITT now, potentially you're going to have some kind of people entering the profession who have had it from the very beginning of their career as part of their kind of professional experience, really. So potentially that's why the instructional
training. I mean, it's always been said as like it needs to. We'll talk about that more in a second. But so I feel like one of the main things the main benefit from the instructional coaching sort of discussion is that at least it's making schools move away from thinking that what you're doing in a lesson is judging the teacher in order to evaluate them and grade the lesson. I mean, if anyone has ever listened to this who still grades lessons, shame on you. What the hell are you doing?
I said in a session recently, I'm not a violent person, I'm not a violent woman, but if you still grade a lesson, I will follow you.
I know, it's sort of, You know,
Completely tongue in cheek. And if you've met me in real life, I could not fight anybody. I'm not very big at all. But I was like, that's really, and it's amazing how many people still do. Trust
yeah.
me, you see it all
But
the
that thing
time.
of like, so the mindset you're in when you're in a lesson, knowing you're going to coach that teacher over some time, and you're part of coaching, it's just a different thing. It's a totally different type of thinking. You're there thinking, how can I help this teacher? What might I suggest? Yeah, but I won't be doing it. They'll be doing it. So they would need to be able to do that. Would they be able to do it? And how do we discuss that? And what things might I ask? How do I bring them on? How will I motivate them? How will I get them to sustain it? Maybe they've got better ideas. And you're thinking like that. And it's a totally different kind of conversation from when you're in the lesson going, oh, this isn't very good, is it? And writing a few notes. Like, it's so lazy and kind of half-formed and delusional that that's going to help them. I just love it. I mean, that in itself, regardless of the structures around it, I mean, that mindset shift is just so brilliant to see schools adopting and unshackling themselves from this sort of drudgery of formal observations and top-down judgments and all that. It is that culture is really shifted and continues to shift, which is brilliant. And I think instructional coaching ideas, even if not it's the whole system of it, has massively influenced that. So I think that we've got a lot to sort of thank the people doing that. Okay, so what's been the main thing on your mind
at the moment? Professionally?
Professionally. Stick to that. Stick to professionally.
Professionally, oh my mind. I've been doing a lot of reading around the new published criteria for ITT.
Initial teacher training. Let's get the acronym.
Initial teacher training. So the new published criteria, it's got quite a few changes in it for 24-25. And one of the bigger changes that's got the largest potential impact is the number of hours that trainees will be asked to teach early on. So rather than a kind of quite steady, incremental, gradual build of number of hours teaching per week, where there's a chance to observe a lot of other teachers, a chance to try out a smaller number of hours with potentially more hours to plan and discuss, and they're going to kind of be thrown in at the deep end, start with 15 hours, which for a novice teacher at the early part of their career, that's quite a big teaching load. And I just wonder what the effect might be on the retention of trainees, on their workload, on the quality of the sessions that they are going to be able to deliver if they've got to prepare for 15 hours worth. If you think about those processes are not automated yet early on in your career in terms of thinking and planning, and then what effect it might have on schools who will be having to free up those hours of the curriculum for the trainees to be able to deliver those. So I've got some question marks over how school host schools are going to manage this, and how the trainees are going to manage it. So that's what I've been thinking.
How does that compare typically? I mean, just for people who don't know, like, and I probably include myself. Yeah, I pretended it was for the listeners, but it's really for me. How many hours do people typically get now? What's
well, it depends, but broadly about 6 to start with. But that might be 6 in little blocks of, especially in primary. I'm talking from my primary experience. You might do 20 minutes. You might do the story at the end of the day, or you might do the introduction to a lesson and then kind of hand the baton over, and the teacher might do. But joint planned that, so you gradually build it up. You don't kind of go bang, teach 15 hours. And during that time, you get opportunities to see potentially where the start of your lesson, when the baton was passed, is then picked up by somebody else, and where you could have taken it. So there's a real opportunity for lots of reflection and lots of observation and lots of kind of beginning to piece together what practice looks like, rather than trying to work out what practice feels like whilst you're building the plane in the air. And I just have question marks over whether the kind of thrown in at the deep end and sink or swim bit is the right way to do it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of thinking behind it, but I just wonder how it's going to be managed, both in terms of the mentors, the trainees, and the host schools, because those ITT students will still be completing assignments and coursework, and potentially towards the end of the academic year applying for jobs and all of the things that are. It's a lot, I think, is mine.
There's still partnering with a teacher who's their mentor, who's supporting them. So, like you do more of the teaching than I do, so don't just watch me more, I'll watch you more. And I don't know, so you do have to then 15 hours is chunky in that sense. Maybe the thinking there is, it is really about the relative benefits of practice and classroom time on the ball sort of thing, rather than anticipating that moment when you have to do that. Yeah, so I guess there'll be some people who really fly with that and find that more practically useful to them as trained to be teachers. But the educative aspect of ITT, where you're learning about teaching and developing a sort of philosophy of teaching at the same time, I guess there's the time for thinking about that is going to be squeezed out a little bit. It's hard, it's complicated to get it right. So what is that what's, from your knowledge, what's the status of that change? Is it happening? Is it about to happen?
Well, it's in the published new ITT criteria for 24-25. So it's coming. It's further down the track, and it's just how schools are going to be able to think about managing that in terms of mentoring and trainees and curriculum space, and also things like centralized planning, things like that. Is this a move towards expecting more centralized planning to have been produced, so that the trainees don't have to think so much about the planning, because a lot of it's already there, so they can think more about the delivery? There's all sorts of question marks that are kind of hanging over this change to the hours, because it's a really significant ramp up of how much you're expected to teach. And I was trying to cast my mind back to the dim and distant past of when I did my teacher training. But I did one over 4 years. I did a very strange course, but it was over 4 years. My teacher training was about, and we didn't do that much teaching until our 3rd or 4th year. We've done lots and lots of bits and bobs in year 1 and 2, and I'll be interested to see how this one pans out. And what I need to do is to delve more into the research base underneath why the change has happened, to kind of get my head around the rationale for it, and and how best to support trainees and teachers in school once this kind of is rolled out. So that's what's been on my mind, Tom. That's what I've been thinking about a lot.
I feel like, it's another one of these sort of social media driven things where, so for example, one of my, I guess it's a complaint that I have about some certain behaviours is that if someone voices a personal experience which is critical of their training, or sort of feels that they wish they'd learnt this, a whole pile of people will pile in and say, on behalf of the whole of the ITT sector, defend it. And you think, well, no, just listen to that person's experience. That person is saying, for them, when they went to their course, they wish they'd learnt more about cognitive science or behaviour management than they did. And just listen to that, because that's what they're saying. But on the other hand, I think one of the arguments I've listened to, and I think is true, is that a teacher training organisation like a university is a partner with the schools in the placements, and the training is the product of all of that. And the training is a product of the first year, the second year, and the third year. And if you see the things in holistically in that way, you start thinking, well, okay, so let's not talk about, I come out of an ITT provision ready to roll. If I see 3 years as an integrated process, which is the ideal, isn't it? What might be the best contribution of that kind of higher education input at the beginning? And it might actually be more theoretical than practice because of the partnership with the school. And I think that the argument gets drowned out because of different kind of people's expectations of what an ITT kind of program should end with, rather than kind of what it's contributing to it as a whole.
Yeah. And I think that's where the ECF is designed to pick up from, to continue that and see it as a 3-year journey. My concern with this particular one is I think that it's like the curse of knowledge. With like an experienced teacher designing an ITT program, I think we'd potentially have forgotten how many processes and how many approaches are so automatic now that actually we don't remember how we had to kind of fathom our way through them, which kind of links to the instructional coaching bit. And, your walkthroughs will be immensely helpful for early career teachers, novice teachers, ITT students. But I think that to be asked to teach and understand why you're making those decisions for that chunk of timetable of so early on in your teaching experience. It's a big ask when you are novice in everything from behavior management to how the subject is pieced together, rules, routines, norms, the school day, professional relationship. All of that is completely new, and you're going to be at the front in front of the kids for that long. I just think it's a big ask.
I really feel like you know, ITT, a new teacher should be able to walk into a school and not have to think about the resources and the scheme of work for a good while, because you know, you obviously have to then they shouldn't be writing stuff until they're ready to contribute, because you learn, ideally you're going to a situation where you learn from the expertise of the people around you who and the systems and all that, and then you pick that up, and then you realize, you start to evaluate things yourself, and you start thinking, oh, okay, actually that seemed to work better than this, and you start developing ideas. And then when you're ready, you can start saying, do you think you could write a bit of that and joint plan some of that?
Yeah.
But
I think my concern is like if they're teaching 15 hours as well, it reduces that amount of time to have professional conversations, where when I've worked with the ITT students in the past, and I still work with dozens and dozens and dozens every year, and at the lecturing aspect of it, is the conversation where you talk through your planning and say, this is why this goes in this order, this is why I'm doing this first, this is how this lesson connects to that one, and actually narrating not just the process of how to plan a lesson, but how the subject fits together and why the scheme of work is planned in that way. So there's a big difference between, here's the scheme of work, crack on with it, and you know, we've prepared all the resources for you, therefore you are prepared, right through to actually talking through why it's structured in that way, why it's important to emphasize this aspect of the lesson or this aspect of the concept, and why that has to come first before that bit. And it's that rich discussion that I worry about, because yes, they shouldn't necessarily be having to source their own resources and plan their own lessons, but there should be adequate time to develop the kind of professional understanding of why those resources have been crafted in the way that they have, which is equally important. Otherwise, they're just handing somebody with a manual and going, get on with it, which is not how teaching works.
No, but then it's about what you start with. It's like, you know, you don't want to, like you say, build the car while you're driving it. You've got to, like, here's some resources. I mean, we all have I think we're creatures of bias, aren't we? I'm biased by my experience, like everyone. And my experience of learning to teach was, you know, I had a couple of teaching practices which were quite different. And one of them was in a sixth form college where, to be honest with you, I just had to think about which questions to ask and how to explain the physics and the maths A-level. But behaviour management was a cinch. It was easy and never had to think about it. And then I went to another teaching practice in a South Manchester high school in Wythenshawe, where I got kind of burnt every day by the kids calling me Lofty, because I looked like the character Lofty off EastEnders, had spiky hair and little round glasses, and the kids would be going, all right, Lofty, how's Michelle, who was the other character? And I got called Lofty every day for about 4 weeks. It was different. I felt sort of slightly brutalized, but I did also try some sort of good practical lessons. But when I came to choosing a job, I thought, I've got to go work in a sixth form college, because I knew their stuff. You know, they knew their stuff and they taught me how to do it. And I felt that was a good apprenticeship.
I remember rocking up to my second teaching class, my second substantial teaching practice of like 6 weeks, and all the cars in the car park were burnt out. And I went to the front desk and said, am I meant to be here? Am I in the right building? Was I betrayed? Oh, it was parents' evening last night. Someone firebombed the cars, the teachers' cars. It's like, oh, well, I'm the student. Here we go.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was an interesting placement, that one was. But yeah, ITT is, I think over the next few years, we'll see whether this increase in hours is a good thing, a great thing, or a not so great thing.
Yeah, well, let's see. I mean, we all have their moments, and I'll never forget my teacher training. It was for good and bad. I mean, I remember it vividly. So many aspects of it. Some of them were quite funny. I mean, had some hilarious experiences. My very first teaching practice, you know, with trying to video myself. I use this in my training actually now. Like I videoed myself teach with this massive video camera in the back of the class, and when I played it back, what I saw was not pretty. I sort of like this jazz hands clown. I was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, calm down and teach some physics instead of like, it was a shocker. And then, but it was a bit of a triumph. When I taught, as I think it was a year 10 class in South Manchester High School, and I took them outside on the field to teach them how to measure the speed of sound. And it was epic. We had trundle wheels, we were measuring the distance to the gym wall, we were banging bricks to hear the echo, and stop clocks, and we got a result which was so great. The kids couldn't believe it. I was like, that is amazing. We have to measure the speed of sound. And my tutor was there to watch, and he was saying, wow, those kids have never been allowed out before. Pretty brave. But I just thought, well, it's my favorite experiment, so we're going to do it. And that kind of sense of it's worth having a go. I learned that in my teacher training. It's worth having a go. So that was good. Okay, well, look, we're probably going to have to wrap this up soon, this special episode. We've got some great guests coming up, and hopefully people have enjoyed listening to the summer season, but the tail end of last year. Go and check out the Hal Roberts and Caroline Dog episodes. They're both peach. And then also Alam Shah, who we spoke to recently about his fantastic book about science for peace. It's like a sort of literary book about science, a kind of storyteller's explanation of all the big questions in the world, from...
I have bought an extra copy of that book for my oldest daughter. She's mad keen on science, so I have bought her an extra copy for her. She won't want the one with all my notes in it, but she can have one for her.
He's out on Twitter saying, if you buy a class set of my books, I'll come and do a free session in your school.
My goodness.
Yeah. Okay, so look, it's great to chat to you. So many things happening, so many developments in the world of education, and it's always great to talk to people. And we're thrilled with the audience we have for listening to us natter on about it, and looking forward to the ones with our guests coming back up. So thanks so much. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Tom.
See you really soon. So thanks for everyone listening, and check out the back catalogue, and look forward to all the great guests that are going to come up soon.